You know that feeling when you really want to grasp something complex, get right to the heart of it, but without getting totally overwhelmed?
Yeah, avoiding that information overload feeling.
Exactly. That's what we're aiming for today. We're taking a deep dive into a way of thinking that, well, it challenges some core ideas about sustainable and just food systems. We're talking about agroecologism.
Right. And just for anyone maybe new to the term, agroecologism is basically about creating food systems that work with nature, not against it.
Uh-huh.
It really leans on ecological principles, values local knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
what farmers have learned over generations, and puts a big emphasis on fairness, social equity.
It's a really powerful vision, no doubt.
It is.
But today, we're looking at it through, let's say, a different lens, a perspective called Neo-Materialism. Our goal here is to explore a critique, a really fascinating one, that kind of pushes us to rethink some assumptions within agroecologism.
And neo-materialism, I know it sounds a bit academic, maybe a little dense,
It does.
but the core idea is actually quite compelling. It basically asks us to really think about the active role that matter itself plays in shaping things.
Matter itself, like rocks and water.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
Soil, water, plants, microbes, even the technologies we use.
Mm-hmm.
Neo-materialism suggests this stuff isn't just passive, waiting for us humans to act on it.
Okay.
Instead, it's got its own dynamism, its own ability to affect things and be affected. Some thinkers even talk about agency.
Agency for soil.
Sort of, yeah. A
Hmm.
capacity to act, to make a difference in how things unfold.
Interesting. And we've waded through some pretty dense academic papers on this.
We have.
But don't worry, we're here to guide you through it, pull out the really intriguing bits without, bogging you down in academic speak.
Right, extracting the juicy bits.
Exactly. Okay, so let's dive into the first major point of this critique. It centers on something called persistent anthropocentrism. Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is, but the idea behind it is pretty simple, really. The critique argues that even agroecology, which is all about valuing nature, right?
Yeah.
It can sometimes unintentionally keep humans at the very center of the picture.
How so?
Well, while it values nature, the argument goes, it often values it mainly for what it does for us humans. Ecosystem services, pollination, clean water, fertile soil, things that benefit human well-being.
Ah, okay, so it's still about us, ultimately.
That's the critique, yeah. And the neo-materialist counterpoint pushes back on that.
Okay.
It asks us to consider that non-human things think about, like the complex life in a handful of soil, or a plant, or microbes. They might have their own value, their own reason for being, separate from what they do for us.
Intrinsic value.
Exactly, independent of human needs. They have their own ways of acting, of shaping their environment, whether we notice or not. It kind of challenges that human-first viewpoint.
That definitely make you think.
And building on that, on decentering the human, the critique also points to what it sees as a kind of limited view of material agency within agroecology.
Limited how? Agroecology is all about ecological interactions, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It definitely gets the complex relationships between organisms, nutrient cycles, all that. That's central.
So what's missing, according to this view?
The neo-materialist idea is that maybe it doesn't fully capture the broader vitality of matter itself. That matter has this inherent dynamism, this agency that goes beyond those defined ecological links and can influence agriculture in ways that are, well, unpredictable.
Beyond our control or even full understanding.
Yeah, precisely. It's suggesting there's a kind of liveliness to matter that we don't always account for.
Can you give an example? This sounds a bit abstract.
Sure. Think about composting. It's a cornerstone of sustainable practice, right?
Definitely. Building soil health.
Right. But one of the sources points out that the very act of composting, adding this material to the soil, can sometimes unexpectedly shake up the existing soil microbial community.
Shake it up how?
It might lead to, say, nutrient imbalances you didn't intend because the existing microbes and the new compost materials interact in ways you couldn't fully predict.
Ah, okay. So the material itself is sort of reacting.
Exactly. It highlights this self-organizing agency of matter. The soil isn't just passively receiving the compost, it's actively responding, maybe in ways we didn't plan for. The materials have a say.
Right. So even our best intentions can meet unexpected material responses. That connects to the next point, doesn't it? About knowledge.
It does, yeah. Agroecology places huge value on knowledge, both scientific ecological knowledge and that deep local traditional farmer knowledge.
Which is crucial.
Absolutely vital. But the neo-materialist critique raises a challenging question here.
Which is?
Can these human-centered knowledge systems, even combined, ever fully grasp the sheer complexity, the dynamic agencies of the material world they're trying to manage or work with.
So the concern is that our understanding is inherently limited.
Sort of. Or at least that there's a risk we might impose our human models, our ways of thinking, onto a reality that kind of operates by different rules, different logics.
Logics we might not even perceive yet.
Exactly. There might be material processes at play that just don't fit neatly into our current scientific frameworks or traditional understandings. It's a call for a bit more humility, maybe.
Acknowledging the limits of our perspective.
That's
It's
a
humbling, yeah. Our understanding might just scratch the surface.
That's the idea.
Now, agroecology often focuses, understandably, on the biological side of things, soil life, plants, animals.
Right, the living components.
But the critique brings up something else, non-organic materials.
Yes, this is a really key point. Modern agriculture, even efforts towards sustainability, is deeply tangled up with materials that aren't living in the same way.
Like what?
Think about chemical residues in the soil, or water from past practices maybe, or plastics, plastic mulches, irrigation pipes, fossil fuels powering tractors and transport, even digital tech, sensors, data networks.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the neo-materialist view is that these non-organic things aren't just inert background elements.
They're active, too.
Yes. They also have agency. They shape possibilities, create problems, influence how the whole agricultural system works. You can't just analyze the biology without considering how it's intertwined with these plastics, fuels, chemicals, technology.
It's all part of the mix, influencing each other.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Which leads nicely into another related critique, this idea of a persistent nature-culture divide.
Even in agroecology, which tries to be holistic.
Yeah, the argument is that sometimes, even implicitly, there's still a tendency to separate things into natural systems on one side and industrial or human-managed systems on the other, or traditional versus modern.
Okay.
But from a neo-materialist perspective, that distinction gets really fuzzy.
How so?
They talk about nature-cultural assemblages, this idea that everything is kind of woven together. Microbes, technologies, human labor, market forces, weather patterns. It's all interacting and shaping each other constantly.
So nature and culture aren't separate boxes.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
They're mutually constituted. Even a small organic farm relies on tools, maybe seeds from far away, information networks, transportation. All these cultural elements are entangled with the natural soil and plants.
It's all one dynamic, messy assemblage.
That's a good way to put it. Messy, dynamic, interconnected. And this messiness connects to another point. Underestimating material resistance.
Resistance, what does that mean here?
Well, agroecology often works on the principle that if you apply ecological knowledge correctly, boost biodiversity, use natural inputs, you'll get predictable, sustainable outcomes.
That's the goal, yeah.
But the neo-materialist view adds a layer of caution. It stresses that matter itself, the non-human elements, can resist or adapt in ways that disrupt our plan.
Like the compost example again.
Exactly. That unexpected nutrient shift is a form of resistance. Or think about pests evolving resistance to organic pesticides, or sudden extreme weather events, droughts, floods, completely overwhelming, carefully designed agroecological systems. Non-human factors push back. They have their own trajectories.
It's a reminder that we're not fully in control, even when we try to work with nature.
Right. There's an inherent unpredictability because matter itself is dynamic and, well, resistant sometimes.
Okay. Now, agroecology obviously has strong ethical foundations.
Absolutely. It's deeply committed to human well-being, food sovereignty, fair conditions for farmers, and also to ecological health, biodiversity, sustainability. Very important ethical goals.
But the neo-materialist critique suggests broadening that ethical scope.
It does. It calls for an ethics that goes beyond just human interest or even the usefulness of nature to humans.
Meaning?
It suggests thinking about the inherent value of non-human entities themselves. Like, does soil have a right to be healthy, regenerative for its own sake? Does biodiversity have value beyond what it provides us?
So moving beyond human-centered ethics entirely.
That's the challenge it poses, considering the well-being or the flourishing of non-human matter as ethically important in itself.
That's a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It is. And finally, there's the critique related to capitalism. This is where it gets very practical.
How does neo-materialism connect agroecology and capitalism?
Well, agroecology often positions itself as an alternative to industrial capitalist agriculture, which makes sense.
Right.
But neo-materialists point out that even these alternatives think fair trade labels. Organic markets often still operate within the larger global capitalist system. They rely on its supply chains, its market logic.
So they risk getting co-opted.
There's that risk, yeah. The risk of becoming just another niche market, another form of commodification, without fundamentally changing the underlying economic structures.
And the neo-materialist argument goes deeper.
It argues that to really challenge capitalism's impact on agriculture, you have to look at how material agencies themselves are part of the system.
Material agencies like,
Like how the sheer availability and power of synthetic fertilizers reshaped farming independency, or how patented seeds concentrate power and control. These materials aren't just tools, they actively structure the socioeconomic relations.
so the materials themselves embed and enact power relations.
Exactly. You have to analyze that material dimension of power, not just the human economic policies.
Wow, okay. These are some really big ideas. To help us sort of get a handle on them, maybe you could mention some key thinkers or concepts from neo-materialism.
Sure. Jane Bennett is a key figure. Her book, Vibrant Matter, really popularized this idea of non-human actants, things having a kind of liveliness and ability to make things happen. She has that great line,
Huh.
uh, the land is not a passive resource, but a lively participant in its own becoming.
I like that. Lively participant.
Yeah. Then there's Karen Barad. Her concept of interaction is really important.
Interaction, not interaction.
Right, intra. The idea isn't that pre-existing things interact, but that entities and their boundaries and properties actually emerge through their interactions that are fundamentally entangled from the start.
So things are defined by their relationships, not before them.
That's the gist of it, yeah.
Yeah.
It challenges seeing things as separate, independent entities that just bump into each other.
Okay, who else?
Manuel Delanda's work on assemblage theory is relevant too. It moves away from seeing things as neat, closed systems. Instead, it focuses on how diverse components, human, non-human, material, social, come together dynamically, often unpredictably, to form assemblages. It's more fluid.
Less about fixed structures, more about dynamic coming together.
Exactly. And thinkers like Rosie Braidotti explore the fluidity of matter and really push against those old dualisms, nature-culture, human-unhuman.
These concepts really do offer a different way of seeing things. So let's try to bring it all together. What's the core message, the main thrust of this neo-materialist critique of agroecologism?
Well, I think in essence, it's saying agroecologism is valuable. It's a huge step forward in thinking ecologically. But it could go further
Further how?
by more fully embracing the agency, the liveliness, the influence of all matter, not just the traditionally ecological parts, by truly moving beyond that subtle human-centeredness that can sometimes linger.
And acknowledging the complexity, the entanglements.
Exactly. Recognizing the deep, messy, dynamic interplay of all the material forces, human, non-human, organic, inorganic, that actually shape agriculture on the ground.
So it's not a rejection of agroecology at all?
Not at all. It's more like an invitation to deepen its analysis, to become perhaps even more radical in its understanding of the world.
By adopting maybe a more humble stance.
I think that's a good way to put it. A more humble, more attentive engagement with the material world in all its complexity. The hope is that this could open up new ways of thinking, new ways of acting, new ways of coexisting with Earth's processes.
Moving beyond just managing or controlling nature, even sustainably.
Right, towards a different kind of relationship.
This has definitely given me, and hopefully our listeners, a lot to chew on. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If we genuinely shifted our view, saw soil, water, plants, even technologies as active participants, not just resources, how would that change things?
How would it change our approach not just to farming, but maybe to climate change, to resource management, to, well, everything?
What possibilities might open up if we really acknowledge that vibrant matter all around us? It's a powerful thought to end on.
It is. And if folks are intrigued, exploring some of those thinkers we mentioned, Bennett, Barad, Delanda, could be really rewarding.
Absolutely. A great starting point for anyone wanting to dive deeper themselves.